Hello, my name's Woodley. I want to welcome you to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about 8 areas that you should consider when analyzing land to build a dream home on. Now, there's a lot of discussions about land and the use of land, and for this particular video, I'm going to share about those who have the desire to build a home on with that focus in it, and many of those areas that you want to concern. I've gathered this information from my own research over the last couple of years as we have gone and set forth to build our dream home. It wasn't a search that I initially engaged in, but it was information that I realized was important along the way. For us, we're building on some of our family's land, so we have the advantage of that, but these are things that factor into the cost, the decisions, the lifestyle, and even some ways where you can make some money with that. So let's get right into it here. The first area that you want to think about is the geography of this and the location. What are the views that you have? What do you want to see where you're building this house? It's something that you want to enjoy. You want to have beautiful views. In relationship to those views, you want to think about the orientation of the house. One of the advantages that you can have with a south-facing home is you can take advantage of the solar gain if you live in a cooler climate like we do just south of the Adirondack Mountains. Or if you're setting up solar panels, perhaps you want to have that included in this. And you want them to be south-facing to maximize that. You also want to consider what type of structures are you hoping to put there. Do you want to have a barn? Do you want to have some animals? Do you want to have outbuildings? How would those fit in the layout? And you also want to consider the weather. And not just the weather when it's nice or when you're looking at it, but in each season of it. You see here this picture of the winter time on the land that we're building here. And one of the things that I like about it is, although the weather is snowier even than where we live, it's also really beautiful in that place. So you want to factor in what is the weather like in each of the different times of the year. Where we live now to where we're moving is not that far where we're building, but it's typically 5 degrees colder and it's a lot snowier. So you want to be aware of that. The second area that you need to think about is the landscape. What do we have here? What are the clearing needs to do this? Are you going to have to remove a lot of trees? Do you have brush that needs to be removed? Are you going to do that yourself? Are you going to hire someone to do that? You might want to rent some equipment to do that. You might want to purchase some equipment to do that. You need to kind of think about what's your time frame. How is that going to happen? In addition to that, you want to think about your topography. We had to have a topographic survey done where we're building because we live on a slope site. Obviously, flat is simpler, but there's sloped gives you things you can take advantage of, like the walkout basement unit that we are building for my in-laws to live in. So, slab on grade versus basement. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is how does the water move across the property? This is particularly important as you're putting driveways in or thinking about location, the type of water pressure that you might have on it. There's really nothing that substitutes just some good observation of how water moves on that. The soil structure is also going to really help you. Do you have clay soil? Do you have sandy soil? That's going to contribute to things. If you have to do a septic system, it's going to help you understand what type of issues you're dealing with related to water management, which is a big issue. The third thing you want to think about is your utilities, your water. Are you going to need to drill a well, or do you have municipal water? If you're going to drill a well, you may want to talk to people who live in that area or along the same plane. Some neighbors, ask them what depth have they had to drill their well at, what's their water like, is there lots of iron in it, etc. Will you have a sewer or a septic system? You want to look at your electric here. I've shown you kind of a map of ours on Google Earth where we have a utility pole that happens to be running across. So we're within a distance where we can run electric. Once you start getting over 500 feet, you're going to have some significant expense with getting electric. Are you thinking of going fully off grid? There's a lot of cost associated with that. Do you have natural gas there? That's going to factor into your heating options, your appliances. All of those things contribute. Is there internet access? Is there wired internet access? Or are you looking at a satellite or a cell phone option with that? You want to be aware of what it is you're moving to, because these things affect your lifestyle. And you have certain ideas of what's possible, but until you ask those questions, you're not really sure. The fourth thing you want to look at is your municipality and the access. So, are there deed restrictions on the land? What is the lot size that's required for building? You want to look into those local codes and understand what you might be dealing with. How are you going to access the property? If there's a deed restriction, do you need a right of way to cross another property with that? If there's a driveway, how long is it going to be? What material are you going to use to do that? And how are you going to manage that? If you have a gravel driveway, there's going to be some ongoing maintenance with that. Are you going to do that? Are you going to hire somebody to do that? Do you have to have it plowed or snow blowed? All of these things go into it there. And then the easements that you said, like, how are you getting? Is this a public road that gets to it? Are you going across private land with that? You really want to be aware of those things, because they're going to really factor into your own usage and some of the restrictions that may be in place for that. The fifth area to consider is environmental conditions. As we looked at ours, part of the land that we own is wetland. And so we had initially thought about bringing a driveway up off of one road, but to go across the federal wetland would be something that we didn't want. So we had to bring that another way. Perhaps there's hazardous materials there, or endangered species. You want to look into these things, and you can do some searching online. You can do some talking with neighbors, get some aware of what was this thing used before. Sometimes people just dump stuff in places, and you can get into it and it can become a real mess. Or you might have a particular usage. I know one local area where they were putting in a big solar project, and there was a protected bird species, and they had to wait a number of years for that bird to migrate away before they could do it, because it was a protected animal. So those things can all come into play, and you want to have some awareness about those issues. The sixth thing, and this is really big, you want to think about your lifestyle. And how does your lifestyle work in the area and in the location in the land that you're wanting to build? How far is it from the activities that you enjoy? The stores, the schools, etc. And what are the caretaking requirements? The lawn care, forest management, garden, animals, your driveway. What are these things that you're envisioning doing? You know, I've gonna have a 1,200-foot driveway. That's going to require my time to be able to snow blow, to take care of it. There's a lot of woodland, chainsaws, things like that. All of those things are things that I really enjoy to do. I'm looking forward to. Our kids in the space, we're looking forward to be able to playing with that. But if you're someone who's on the go all the time and you're constantly involved in all types of things with your kids, maybe you're traveling, maybe that's something that you want to realistically analyze and say, do we really want to spend all our time with this, or have to pay for people to manage those things? Does it fit your lifestyle? The same thing with your recreational life. Does it provide you the opportunities that you would enjoy recreationally, or are you always going to be going somewhere else? And if you're always going to be going somewhere else, perhaps you don't want to take on a land that has such requirements with it. Maybe you would scale that back into a smaller size lot. So give a lot of consideration to lifestyle, and you may find that changes over time. So you really want to weigh that, factor that, understand that heavily before you just go into something without deep consideration. The seventh thing is you want to understand your taxes, your insurance, and the land value. So get an estimate of the property taxes. You could talk to a realtor about similar properties with the type of home that you're wanting to build. You might do a local web search of properties of similar quality and size, get a feel for what are the taxes in those areas. That obviously, when you're thinking about it, sometimes you can begin and you can just think about, okay, what's the build thing going to cost? But when we got to add the taxes onto that, and how does that factor into your budget? Okay. The next thing that you have to consider is special insurance considerations. Are you in a flood zone? Is there fire mitigation? I'm not specifically familiar with the fire mitigation things, but one of my former students had worked for the Forest Service, and out in the West, that was a real important factor of how close the home was to where they have a lot of fire issues and the type of debris. So those things can really have a big influence. And then you want to look too at like comparable home prices. And are you building something that fits within that market, or are you seriously overbuilding that market? You know, if you put a $400,000 house in a place, that might be reasonable. But if you put a $1.4 million home in that place, are there anything else that has a comparable value to that? So you're thinking in the long term. Now, when you're planning your dream home, you don't intend to leave that property, but things change in our life, and you may. And so you want to understand, are you going to get the value and the equity from it that you've put into it? The last thing that I want you to think about is sometimes when you're looking at land, it feels like beyond what you can do, but there's also realizing there's creative ways that you can use this land, because land is a great resource, and there's ways that you can monetize the things that you have. So one option is you have timber, you could have the land logged and you could sell those. There can be agricultural tax benefits. You might do a tree farm or an orchard, crops, flowers. You might raise chickens or goats or horses. You could have camping sites on there. You could do short-term rentals. You might build a log cabin and do an Airbnb. Sometimes storage can be a big thing. If you're in an area where there's a lot of recreation, people would be looking for like RVs or boats, and they need land for that. You could do a roadside stand with worms or firewood, honeybees, or perhaps even lease it to a farmer. And this is just the beginning of that list, but it's helpful to begin to think of, okay, maybe we're stretching our budget and what we're trying to do, but perhaps there's other ways that you can begin to, as you steward that land, you can begin to create some income that can help you kind of fuel that dream that you have to build that home. And so I hope that this gave you some insight and made you think about some things that maybe perhaps you hadn't as you are considering this. I know for us, it was at first a huge dream, and now as we're moving in the process, it's like really surprising that this is actually happening. And these things have been very helpful to consider them, to learn from. And so if there are other things that I missed that you think are important, I'd love to hear what those are. Feel free to share them in the comments, and thank you so much.